So good morning and good afternoon, everyone. My name is Dimitri Pescia. I'm Director Southeast and East Asia at Agora Energiewende, and I welcome today all of you to our webinars, 9 Insights on Hydrogen in Southeast Asia. Southeast Asia is home to some of the fastest growing economies in the world, and the countries which form the ASEAN, so the Association of Southeast Asian Nations, are very diverse, yet they share some key common challenges. We see climate change having impact more and more on development goals. The region still relies heavily on fossil fuel, and the rate of renewable energy development is somehow lower than other parts of the world. But the energy transition is also gaining strong momentum in the region, most countries having adopted net zero emission targets by the middle of the century or soon thereafter. And the policy discussion in the region is really starting to explore pathways that can realize these commitments. So in this context, hydrogen has generated a lot of attention over the past few years. Several countries in the region have adopted hydrogen strategies, such as Indonesia, Vietnam, or Singapore, and many others are currently intending to do so. Yet, how hydrogen will fit into the national decarbonisation roadmaps is still to be determined. And several uncertainties and open questions remain on which sectors will hydrogen demand be the most important, how hydrogen will be sourced, what would be the impact on infrastructure, on trade, what opportunities exist for economic and industry development. All those questions are currently addressed by energy stakeholders, by societies and policymakers. So to provide some framing around those questions, Agora Industry and Agora Energiewende are releasing today a report entitled 9 Insights on Hydrogen, Southeast Asia Edition. This report that we will present today aims to inform discussion on priorities and no regrets uses of hydrogen specific to Southeast Asia. So the webinar today will last about 90 minutes. It will allow us to discuss those insights in details. We will be having first a presentation from experts from Agora Energiewende. Then we will open a panel discussion with experts from the Southeast Asian region. And then we will take some of the Q&A of the audience in this discussion. And finally, of course, we'll wrap up. So without further ado, I would like to call my colleague Fabian Barrera, who is project manager for Power2X at Agora, and Kathrin Gretener, who is also part of Agora Industry, for a 20-minute presentation, our key insight. So the floor is yours.
Thank you, Dimitri. Good morning, good afternoon, everyone. It's a pleasure for me to be here together with Kathrin to present to you this brief overview of the key outcomes of our report. This report has been the work for a few months. It includes some consultations with some local stakeholders in the region, trying to tailor-make a little bit our recommendations to the regional scope in Southeast Asia, to the regional context. This is an invitation for you to also, after the webinar, after the discussion today in the panel and in this presentation, to visit our website, download the report, and see much more in detail of the analysis that we have there. So next slide, Kathrin, please. So just to start a little bit more on detail or on the content of the report, I'm going to start with the key messages, the key findings that we want to communicate through our analysis. So first, we want to communicate that renewables, prioritizing renewable development in Southeast Asia is key. Without increasing the support for renewable energy development, the affordability of electricity and hydrogen will be at risk. So hydrogen and renewables can be developed hand by hand. As a second message, we have that low carbon hydrogen should be prioritized for certain applications that we call no regret. We will see a bit more during the presentation. It means that hydrogen shouldn't compete with electrification. Electrification should be priority number one as a decarbonization strategy in the region, and it also applies globally. As a number 3 message, we see how the industrial sector in Southeast Asia is growing quite fast. It's becoming quite important, not only for the development, but not only economic, but social also in the region. So the industrial sector in Southeast Asia has the opportunity to start changing priorities and strategies and come to establish as a low carbon industrial sector that will also enhance competitiveness for the region and for the industrial sector in Southeast Asia. The four key finding or a key message we want to communicate is a bit more of a cautious measures regarding trade of hydrogen and power-to-X products or the derivatives of hydrogen, as we see that there can be a risk of overestimating the role of the region in the trade of the global trade of power-to-X products. But we see how power-to-X products of hydrogen derivatives has the option to provide a more positive impact in terms of economic benefits for the region. So we will see a little bit of these messages along the presentation. And I would like to start a little bit with the background, a little bit of contextualization regarding hydrogen in Southeast Asia and globally. So understanding why the hype of hydrogen, what is the overall interest of hydrogen globally and in the region. We've seen how hydrogen has been portrayed as a decarbonization strategy in the last couple of years. Many organizations have developed scenarios trying to understand the projections of hydrogen use in different sectors globally. We see, for example, in the figure here, how different organizations have a different range of projections regarding hydrogen demand for different sectors. And this has created a hydrogen hype that we see how many countries are developing hydrogen strategies, developing hydrogen roadmaps. And this together with the geopolitical challenges that we have seen in the last couple of years regarding the global chain, supply chain for energy industrial products, have also created the importance of what is called the hydrogen strategy, that is looking allies to secure the hydrogen supply. This has come also to Southeast Asia. Southeast Asia, as Dimitri mentioned earlier, is a region that is still quite dependent on fossil fuels, especially on coal, and then also on LNG. And that's why hydrogen could be a strategy for decarbonization. But we see a lot of also international pressure in the countries in the region. So this, for example, half of the existing pilot projects are currently funded by international sources. And in this context, we have developed also a little bit of an analysis for the hydrogen insights. So starting with the first insight, we identify how important and key renewable hydrogen development and deployment will be for also supporting the hydrogen development in the region. So we see here in the figure some of the factors that affect the hydrogen costs. The main key factor is electricity costs, but we see also, for example, the renewable resources represented here as full hours play also an important role. The CapEx for electrolyzers will play also an important role, especially in the first stage of development, as we see that now the CapEx plays a big part of the investments in hydrogen development. But we also have other risk of investment that, for example, are represented in terms of WACC. And that's how we see sometimes, for example, in the region, renewables still have high risks of investment. So that's why, as we see here, is that creating a policy that supports a regulatory and policy framework that supports renewable energy is going to be key to also enhance the opportunities for hydrogen development in the region. Moving to the next insight, we will talk more about the priority applications for hydrogen. We have developed this overview of applications that we call as no regret for different sectors. The no regret applications are those applications that where hydrogen will not compete with electrification. As I mentioned before, electrification should be the priority to achieve climate neutrality, while hydrogen more as a secondary option. We have some applications that are more controversial, that will depend a bit on the context, on the energy resources available at national, but also regional level, because we have also big countries in Southeast Asia that have different regional conditions. But we have also those applications that are a bad idea. And this is made also in a way to provide certain guidance to policymakers, for example, where to prioritize hydrogen use, but also to call a bit attention that if we don't prioritize hydrogen for certain applications, wide deployment of hydrogen could also cause certain stress to the energy systems in Southeast Asia. For instance, in a scenario where we don't prioritize direct electrification, the hydrogen demand by 2050 could be 5 times higher than in a scenario that we have prioritized electrification. And this will have certain consequences in the ways that the energy resources are going to be used, in the way that energy systems are going to be developed, and also the way that investments have to be prioritized in the region. So this is just an overview, and we will see a little bit of these applications along the other insights as well. Moving forward, we're going to talk about one important aspect, that is about how renewable hydrogen can enhance energy security in the region, because the region is quite dependent on fossil fuels. And especially we see a trend moving towards LNG and fossil gas imports. The region is expected to become in 2025 a net importer. We have for sure some of the countries that are a producer of fossil gas. We have, for instance, Malaysia, but in general, all the countries in the region are going to become net importers by 2025. So in the short term, and this has certain consequences because we have seen how the global prices for gas and for LNG is quite volatile. And especially in the last couple of years with geopolitical events, starting with the Russian invasion to Ukraine, but also now we see the conflicts in the Middle East affects always the price of gas. And this is factors that the region cannot influence strongly. So the region is going to be always exposed to this, the diversity of prices, to the dynamic prices, and it affects also the energy security. We see that fossil-based hydrogen with CCS if it's prioritized as a contrary to renewable hydrogen, could increase the gas demand. And therefore, we see that maybe domestic renewable hydrogen could mitigate this dependency to fossil gas and also to exposure to the global gas market. We will see a little bit also in the next slide how, for example, comparing in the left side or in the first figure, we have the variation of the gas price in the last couple of years and how it affects immediately also the price of fossil hydrogen and fossil hydrogen with CCS, and how sometimes for certain countries, renewable hydrogen could be even a most competitive option when you have these peak prices in the gas market. At the same time, we see that by 2030, in the map on the right, the region can expect quite competitive prices if the correct policies taking place. And that's why we say that countries should prioritize renewable hydrogen over fossil-based hydrogen with CCS because they have the domestic resources and it could enhance their energy security and mitigate dependence to global markets. However, we have some countries that are producers, as I mentioned before, and for them, maybe evaluating fossil-based hydrogen with CCS could be as a bridge technology, but certain cautions should be taken into consideration. For example, the fugitive emissions, the risk of stranded assets in the long term, as we see a green global market or a green appetite for green products growing globally. Also, the investments for infrastructure, for carbon storage infrastructure, all the regulatory framework regarding CCS is also certain constraints for this technology. So it's all that need to be considered in this case. I also want to take the opportunity to invite you to our website. We have the same LCOH map for 2030 in a very interactive way. You can see much more details there about the different calculations of these costs for the different countries. We move forward to our fourth insight, and it's talking more about the industrial sector and how renewable hydrogen could boost the decarbonization of the industrial sector in Southeast Asia. Southeast Asian industrial sector is quite important. It's growing quite fast. It's very new, but it's growing quite fast. So we see, for instance, here in the steel sector, how Southeast Asia is coming from depending currently more about 56% of their steel demand for imports. Expected in 2030, this is going to be reduced to 25%. So this capacity for production of steel in the region is growing very fast. But at the same time, given the technology that is prioritized for steel production, the emissions only by 2026 are expected to triple. So we see how important it is to start mitigating the emission-intensive manufacturer, for example, in the case of steel. The region has something interesting that is, as it's a new in the steel sector, I mean, is kind of a new sector. So electric arc furnace was the main technology used at the beginning, and this is it's less emission intense than other technologies, and also facilitates, for example, integration as a renewable hydrogen as a reduction agent for the production of green iron that is posterior converted to green steel. However, in the last years, we see a lot of investment most in blast furnace. That is a technology that is much more carbon intensive, that it will require, for example, a high dependency of coal, and it transition to a low carbon technology is much more costly. We see a lot of these investments coming from foreign countries, especially from China and Japan. So we see the need that to change the strategy for the growth of the sector, to identify how these investments can be directed in a way that are aligned with a low carbon development, and with the energy transition of the sector, because it also will enhance the competitivity of the countries in a global market. For example, for green steel, if they are looking into the opportunities for trading these products. We also see the chemical sector. So currently, the chemical sector is quite diverse in the region. We have countries consuming different types of chemicals, but also producing. We see, for example, the case of Indonesia and Malaysia, which are big producers of not only ammonia and fertilizer, we have the figure here, but also of methanol. And all of these processes are based on fossil hydrogen currently and can be decarbonized using renewable hydrogen. This renewable hydrogen here will also open opportunities, for example, for green ammonia, that it can be also used as a fuel for the shipping sector, in the decarbonization of the shipping sector. As a green fertilizer, can also provide more diverse global chain supply for fertilizers. We have seen how fertilizer prices has suffered increasing costs in the last couple of years due to the gas market variations, and also open opportunities for new markets, as is the case for synthetic sustainable aviation fuels for the decarbonization of the aviation sector. So the chemical sector in Southeast Asia that is already existent and it has already some experience could benefit for improving or for integrating renewable hydrogen into the production or processes. And with this, I want to open the floor to Kathrin to continue with our insights.
Thank you very much, Fabian. Hello to everyone. Good morning, good afternoon. So I will take over the last 5 insights. And jumping right back to the same topic on green ammonia, our insight 5 states that it should be reserved for the decarbonization of fertilizer in the shipping industry. So as you might know, there has been a recent interest in Southeast Asia to use green ammonia as a co-firing technology to decarbonize the young coal power plants fleet in the region. So we have looked at this technology in particular from an economic, environmental, and technical view. And first of all, we have found that this technology is economically inefficient compared to renewables. So as you can see on the graph on the left-hand side, that a 20% co-firing of ammonia in Indonesia and Vietnam is much more expensive than building additional capacity for wind and PV in the region. Furthermore, there's high emissions from using co-firing, green ammonia co-firing in coal plants, as 20 to 50% of co-firing of green ammonia leads to higher CO2 emissions than in natural gas plants. So it's better even to use natural gas plants in that sense. So therefore, we recommend to apply this PTX product, so green ammonia, for the chemical, the fertilizer, and the shipping industry. Also, it's important to know that the high demand for green ammonia in coal co-firing would lead to high pressure on the demand for green ammonia, which would lead to higher fertilizer prices. Our 6th insight looks at the use of hydrogen in cars, so especially passenger vehicles. And as you can see on the left-hand side, we compare the efficiency rate of battery electric vehicles, so what we called electric vehicles, compared to fuel cell electric vehicles, so the use of hydrogen. So comparing these technologies, you can see that there is a 69% efficiency rate using battery electric vehicles, whereas fuel cell electric vehicles only leads to a 26% efficiency rate. The third technology is using power to liquid, so transforming hydrogen into power to liquid and then using it as a normal combustion fuel, which only leads to a 13% efficiency rate. So we see that economically and environmentally, it is better to use battery electric vehicles. And this has been also seen by the economy overall, as you can see on the right-hand side, that battery electric vehicles have now 14% of the global market sales annually, whereas fuel cell electric vehicles only have 0.2% of sales. Insight 7 looks at infrastructure, coming back to the question of gas infrastructure versus power infrastructure. And we think that power infrastructure should be prioritized in the short term to medium term, and hydrogen infrastructure should be thought in an integrative way with energy, industrial, and climate and trade considerations. So given the importance of electricity in decarbonization goals, as Fabian has already stated, the power infrastructure should be prioritized, especially nationally. And the investment in gas infrastructure should be considered with the future hydrogen economies. So to avoid higher costs, stranded assets, and carbon lock-ins, we should think of where exactly hydrogen will be used, how it will be transported. And so it should be integrated with the power sector and especially with the industry development, as hydrogen will be mainly used in the industry sector, as we have seen before. To kick off the hydrogen infrastructure, we think that a good start could be to build off-grid hydrogen projects that can later be integrated into a broader system plan. Our 8th insight looks at trade and states that hydrogen trade will be regional, but Southeast Asian countries could capitalize on their proximity to key demand centers in East Asia for the export of PDX products. So coming back to the question of hydrogen versus PDX products, we see that there's a techno-economic advantage to transport PDX products over long distances compared to compressed hydrogen. So pipelines for long distance transport are not recommended. Furthermore, the use of PDX products directly and without reconversion, so for example, shipping green ammonia to Japan is economically more efficient, as you don't have this efficiency loss while transforming the green hydrogen back to green ammonia back, to hydrogen. Additionally, there's a socioeconomic benefit of transforming hydrogen locally into higher value added products, such as fertilizers and green steel, and then only after export these products. So as you can see on the graphic on the left side, to this day and also in 2030, countries such as Indonesia, Vietnam, and Thailand will have higher hydrogen costs than Namibia, Australia, and Colombia, for example, when they want to export it to a country such as Japan. This is due to the high electricity generation costs introduced by Fabian earlier. So this has to do mainly with the capex and the weighted average cost of capital, which means that Southeast Asian countries should first look at the reduction of these costs for electricity, and then in the longer term could use the proximity to, for example, Japan and South Korea to export PDX products. Our 9th insight looks at the governance structure of hydrogen in the region and states that clear and resilient long-term policy frameworks will attract investors and increase local value creation. So as you can see on the map on the left-hand side, as of today, there has been a lot of development in the governance of hydrogen in the region, as countries such as Vietnam, Malaysia, Indonesia, and Singapore just published their hydrogen strategy, or in the couple of months back. So this is a really good sign, which will attract investors. And furthermore, there is a need to develop R&D and capacity building in the region to accompany the uptake of hydrogen and the transformation into a value chains aspect in the region. Last but not least, there is different types of financing mechanisms, such as a blending of equity and debt financing that could be used to develop hydrogen products. And additionally, there are programs by international financial institutions, such as the World Bank or the Asian Development Bank, who or also have programs to help kickstart hydrogen projects in the region. So I wanted to end with this little disclaimer that our 9 Insight on Hydrogen report is now available online, so you can scan this QR code. I will leave it on for 30 seconds so you can maybe take a picture or log in directly. And then I would move on and thank you very much for listening and hand over to Dimitri. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Kathrin, and thank you very much, Fabian, for presenting us these 9 insights on hydrogen for Southeast Asia. I think there is a lot of thoughts which you brought forward and point for discussion. This is why I'm very pleased that we were able to bring together experts from the region. And I will call our panelists one by one. We will start this panel discussion with short inputs, and the first panelist will be Shani Nadhilah. Shani is a senior research analyst on power in ASEAN Center for Energy, ACE. She's leading the work on the ASEAN Power Grid, but also on emerging technologies such as hydrogen. And Shani has experience working to support energy transition in Indonesia also through the UK-Indonesia G2G program, where she was responsible for shaping long-term power system planning strategies and helped MEMR establishing the Indonesia's hydrogen strategy. So we'll probably have a lot of interesting insight from Shani. We have also Dr. PHAM Hoang-Luong. Thank you for joining us, Dr. PHAM, who is Associate Professor at the Hanoi University of Science and Technology. Dr. PHAM is Senior Lecturer at the School of Mechanical Engineering and Director of the Vietnam-Japanese International Institute for Science and Technology at Hanoi University of Science and Technology. He is also graduated from this university and received his master's and PhD degree in energy technology from the Asian Institute of Technology in Thailand and also the National Polytechnic Institute of Toulouse. Then we have Dr. Sirichai Koonaphapdeelert. So Sirichai is from the Energy Research and Development Institution in Chiang Mai University. He has been leading Thailand's hydrogen roadmap efforts and consultation with Thai authorities, EPO. So Sirichai works cover the demand, supply, and transport of hydrogen in Southeast Asia and beyond. And his institution, RD, has conducted the first green hydrogen pilot site in Chiang Mai. So we are very excited also to get your view, Sirichai. And finally, I will call Pramote PUENGJINDA, who is Senior Associate at GIZ Thailand for the International Hydrogen Ramp-Up Program, H2UP. Pramote has a PhD in Energy and Hydrocarbon Chemistry from Kyoto University. Before joining the program at GIZ, Pramote was a researcher with PTT's Innovation Institute. So thanks a lot to the four of you to join us for the discussion. And I would like to start with a quick reflection on the insights that we have presented and ask you one by one to give basically your view on the insights we presented. Is it aligned with your own thinking and the experience you have seen in your work? And maybe if you see potentially divergent views on what we just proposed or highlighted in the presentation. I would like to ask you, Shani, to start with providing us also a bit of a regional dimension of this topic. So Shani, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Dimitri, for the kind introductions and also inviting me for this webinar for the launch. I think first I would like to respond to how this kind of publications fits us in the regions. I think there are high relevancy of the findings that Agora put in the insights presented previously that coincides with our thinking as well as a intergovernmental regional body or institutions in Southeast Asia. For the one that not aware, ASEAN Center for Energy is intergovernmental institutions that support the ASEAN member states to collaborate regionally on energy. And in fact, that currently the hydrogen topic is not yet part of the topic that we put in the program area under the ASEAN Plan of Action on Energy Cooperations, which is we shortly call it APAEC, which is a blueprint of how the region actually collaborate in terms of energy. And hydrogen is very emerging topic, and it's very hype. And I think due to the hypeness of the hydrogen, this publications actually put it into context of Southeast Asia, where it's perhaps quite different in terms of energy landscape and also priorities with other regions as well. So we also find many of points that raised are aligned or with our thinking, but perhaps this is not divergent, but perhaps something that is not highlighted more is due to the fact that hydrogen supply chain and hydrogen sort of ecosystem is completely different to the other topic or other energy section, because it's cross sectoral. The utilizations and also the production itself actually involve a lot of different sectors to also incorporate it. And so in context of ASEAN, this kind of thing, it should be carefully planned, because first, I think there's high uncertainty of the hydrogen development. It's still also under development in other regions as well in terms of technology. And the second thing is that because it requires the whole ecosystem, infrastructure, transport, and storage, which is very different with other sector like oil and gas or electricity, the investment need to be put for the hydrogen ecosystem to be built is something considerable or like high. So I think it's very important for the ASEAN or the countries that is considering to develop hydrogen to first identify where are the roles of hydrogen potentially can be used in decarbonizing their energy system. And to look at this, they need the capacity to do long-term energy planning, which involves the hydrogen role in it. And I think your publications already highlight some recommendations of where to start and where to look at. So the countries in ASEAN that has already sort of published their hydrogen national strategy is a good start of where to identify the role of hydrogen within the context of their country, whether in the utilizations and in their energy landscape as well. But that's just the start. So what I want to emphasize that because this technology is still evolving, there's many uncertainties. So the strategies that has been built by the countries, I think, need to be evaluated or periodically assessed from time to time, because there will be technological advancement, and then also to invest in hydrogen, it will some good investment decisions need to be made. And I think this is something that perhaps I want to highlight more, that long-term energy planning and to look at is one of the helpful tools to perhaps identify where are the priorities, and those priorities perhaps very different from nation to nations, including their sort of like industry or energy landscape. The other thing I want to highlight is that apart from the clean or hydrogen role in the decarbonizations, is what the role of hydrogen that can renewable hydrogen that can provide industry decarbonizations. I think this is very much aligned, but what I want to highlight is this is something that should not be overestimated, because first, when we are talking about the industry decarbonizations with hydrogen, I think the puzzle that we need to put in place is where this can be used, where hydrogen can be used in the industry, and is that alternative comparable to other fuel in terms of economics. So I think it's we need to look at it like very broad and holistically, not only the projections of LCOH or levelized cost of hydrogen, but also in terms of productions, but also the transport and the storage needs or investment that needs to go with it. So I think if I can add to that point from the Agora publications on the role of renewable hydrogen in industry, it's perhaps worth to look at how can hydrogen be productions and utilizations in industrial sector could be co-located, because it then makes sense in terms of transport and storage, and perhaps it could bring lower the cost of the hydrogen itself. So there are innovative type of methods or policies could be catered, depends on where we look at the role of hydrogen in different types of utilization. So I think that's my two take or inputs from for the report. Thank you.
Thanks a lot, Shani. First of all, to highlight some additional points that we may need to look in more details, but globally also to agree with some of the insights we propose. So I know that this integrated planning will be key, and also the coordination at the level of the region overall, and also looking in more details on this question of localization or co-localization of renewable uptake for hydrogen production on industrial sites. Thanks a lot. So we'll come back to some of the issue in a moment, but I would like now to ask Dr. PHAM from the HUST to provide his view on what we just presented. Also looking at the fact that Vietnam just adopted its hydrogen strategy. So I would be quite interested to get your view both on what we presented, if it actually aligned with the Vietnam plan, where you see potential divergence and additional ideas for discussion. Thanks, Dr. PHAM.
Thank you, Dimitri, for inviting me. Okay, first of all, I'd like to thank you, Agora, okay, for kindly extending my invitation so that I'll be available for webinar today regarding the insights on hydrogen for Southeast Asia. And thank you also Fabian and Kathrin for providing us very interesting and informative presentation on the 9 insights on hydrogen for the Southeast Asia. And as already mentioned by Dimitri, that you already know that we recently, approved the strategy for the hydrogen energy developments in Vietnam. And also a little bit 2 months before, the Prime Minister already approved the National Master Plan on Energy, addressing the role of the hydrogens in our energy development, try to keep up with the net zero emissions 2050 target. I just have some comments, okay, and some feedback from these 2 insights already mentioned by Fabian and Kathrin. Okay, now number 1, the clear long-term support for renewable is crucial for reduced cost of electricity and hydrogen production. That is true because you know that before the government has approved the strategy for hydrogen's energy development, there are a lot of study funded by different international organizations on how and in what way hydrogen could be produced, could be used in Vietnam domestically, and also for potential for export. We have already done a lot of calculation, and the fact-finding has already shown that the price of the hydrogen production depend heavily on the electricity's cost and also for the cost of electrolyzers. But the most important thing that for the renewable, okay, I mean that basically you have to realize on renewable system just to produce green hydrogen. So that's very clear, and we totally agree with the insights already found out by the Agora. This is very updated information, and we try to follow that. And it's very valid, very crucial with the Vietnam context. Now, the second insight talking about the clear and resilient long-term policy frameworks will attract investors. The second point, increase the local value creations. As you may know, okay, for the time being, I totally agree with Shani in addressing that the hydrogen technology is a new technology. It requires a complete ecosystem for hydrogen production, and that is a certain of uncertainties for the production, for the development of the hydrogen for energy services. So I think in order to reduce the cost, in order to make this happens, I think that the long-term policy frameworks must be, formulated or set up somewhere, try to encourage the investor, not only for the local, also for international investor, to invest on that kind of new technology, try to minimize the cost of the green hydrogen, of the hydrogen production. And particularly whenever the new technologies are emerging, there is a necessary for the local, for the nation, okay, to localize. So I think that whenever you have very good and stable long-term policy framework, that is to create a lot of work for the local people, try to follow for the new product. So with that kind of thing, we can produce and we can minimize the cost of the hydrogen production, or we call it as the PTH production based upon the CapEx and OpEx in the long run. So with that, we'd like to again congratulate Angora's team already, successfully prepared and presented the report on the green hydrogen, and it is really, crucial, at least for the Vietnam context. Thank you.
Thanks a lot, Dr. Pham, for this quick and very focused contribution to the discussion. So I note again the necessity to reduce the cost of electricity generation. In this context, I'm also going to look in quite a lot of detail what Vietnam government will actually implement, also regarding the offshore wind development, which could be combined with hydrogen production, and this ecosystem of basically industry which provide local value creation. I think this is indeed a very crucial point. So thanks a lot again, and we'll come back to you and also with targeted question regarding the Vietnamese strategy in a couple of minutes. But I would like now to give the floor to Khun Sirichai. And Khun Sirichai, you have been quite involved in developing a hydrogen strategy for Thailand, even though the strategy is not yet adopted. But I'm sure you have a lot of interesting insights also from the Thailand perspective, but potentially also beyond, because I think you have a good understanding of the overall Southeast Asia context for hydrogen. So here again, I would be very interested to see what is your take from our insights. Is there anything that you think we missed? And we will bring this to the discussion.
Okay. First of all, thank you very much for giving me a time to give comments on your report. In general, your report is excellent, and it covers many aspects in hydrogen development in the region. And personally, I feel so sad that Thailand is among a few countries that haven't publicized the hydrogen strategy yet. We are like lagging behind. Yeah. I think there's a reason for that, because Thailand now is going to publicize our national energy plan, which is the integrated energy plan that includes all the power generation sector, or the transport sector, alternative energy sector, including smart city, including the hydrogen plan. All of this will be included in our NEP plan, which is expected to be announced in the mid of this year, I hope. Okay, so that's maybe one of the reasons that we are kind of lagging behind, in terms of publicizing the hydrogen strategy in the region. Second, I would like to discuss with you is the potential applications of hydrogen in the region. I think there's a very good coincidence, or very good way that your report align to what we think that should be the potential application of hydrogen in the region, because I think that the hydrogen should go for the hard to abate sectors first, like in heavy industries, long distance transport, and chemical feedstocks, which we have potential industries like ammonia and methanol in some ASEAN countries. And in Thailand itself, we have many refineries that might require the green hydrogen to be the feedstock for it. So this might create demands for green hydrogen in the future. Also, I have a few questions about your Insight 5, which you seem to have a very strong message against the ammonia co-firing. Maybe it might be good to give some evidence and put some scientific evidence why you against this kind of application, because as I know, a few private sectors are looking at this application, and they seems to be quite interested quite a lot in this. So if you say that ammonia co-firing is not the thing to go for, maybe you should add some reasons or strong reasons in your report. And lastly, I think the whole quality of the report is excellent, and if you can add details in specific countries that can have a potential hydrogen project to come out, then it would be even more excellent. Thank you so much.
Thanks a lot, Kun Sirichai, for this input. And I'm not sure Thailand is lagging behind. Maybe you need also time to develop a really, comprehensive, proper strategy. So let's see. We are all excited to see what will come out from the NEP in Thailand, and also to see when and how Thailand may adopt its own hydrogen strategy. I suggest we will bring back this question of ammonia co-firing in the discussion, and I will pass your question then to the expert of Agora who will provide more evidence-based answer to this question. And when it comes to the focus of the application of hydrogen, it's also indeed very interesting how to use it as a feedstock to decarbonize the chemical sector. And I understand for Thailand, it's an very important application. So we'll come back to you and have some questions specifically on the ammonia co-firing. But then I would like to ask Kun Pramote, the last panelist for today, to also provide his view on the insights we have put for Southeast Asia. Kun Pramote, you have probably an interesting view because you're also having one foot, let's say, on the GIZ German, let's say, program regarding Power-to-X hub, and at the same time you have a very good understanding of the context in Thailand and beyond, but also in Japan where you have studied. So maybe you can also help us to see this dynamic from a regional perspective. So here again, the question to you is quite simple. What do you think about the insight we put forward, and do you have any suggestion of something we have missed or something you don't agree with?
Yeah, thank you very much, Dimitri, for kind introduction. I actually come from Thailand, and maybe my perspective is quite similar to what Dr. Sirichai comments on this. Yeah, basically we are working for HUST program, funded by German government, and trying to develop the early stage development of green hydrogen and also derivative in Bangkok, in Thailand. And so for the next phase, we aim at more broader in Southeast Asia region. And thanks for this meeting, because we get some insights and information to plan for the next phase in Southeast Asia. And I personally do agree and see some potential of your insight. And yes, especially similar to Shani and Dr. PHAM and Dr. Sirichai comments, basically the clear long-term support for renewable is very important to reduce the cost of electricity and also hydrogen production. I personally agree with this initiative because basically the adoption of green hydrogen today is not just about the hydrogen production technology readiness, but also about its current high cost compared to fossil fuel or gray hydrogen. When the cost parity arrive, I understand that industrial are more likely to shift from gray to green hydrogen, and decarbonization in some existing sector can be achieved. And of course, as we know that renewable electricity is the main cost element in the green hydrogen production right now. And in Southeast Asia, there is somehow a dual challenge because they aim at importing fossil fuel for energy security alongside with early stage development of renewable energy, which actually needs more acceleration and some support. And yeah, so far, many countries in Southeast Asia are starting their net zero commitment by increasing the share of renewable energy to reduce the emission and also improve efficiency, which is the most common practice worldwide. And for example, initiatives like coal transition in countries like Indonesia, Malaysia, and of course Thailand focus on transitioning from coal to cleaner energy sources. And then renewable energy can replace the loss of coal-based power plant production. And in this case, increase the renewable share in the country, of course. And so that prioritizing renewable energy supply in Southeast Asia country for cost-effective green hydrogen production is a key starting point. And so transitioning specific industry within hard-to-abate sector like refinery, methanol production or ammonia production to green hydrogen can significantly reduce the emission as this industry right now rely on only the fossil fuel. But as we know that Southeast Asia country is actually not as rich in renewable resource to other regions like Middle East or Oceania region. And so scaling up renewable energy is quite necessary for reducing the levelized cost of electricity and making green hydrogen more competitive in the future. And in addition, I would say diversifying renewable resource beyond solar and wind, such as biomass and also small-scale hydropower project could also alternative option in this region as well. And so that economic upscale and developing long-term support plan are more important to support renewable energy development in this region. For example, feed-in tariffs or tax reduction or are necessary to support that initiative and attract both local investor and also industrial international investor as well. Also, I think that is quite important to address the sustainability aspect in addition, such as identifying sustainable area for renewable development that do not play significant harm to other environmental aspects. For example, food security or deforestation. For example, as mentioned in EU taxonomy, do no significant harm to principle. And so therefore, a smooth transition to a clean hydrogen economy, I personally agree that prioritizing renewable energy is a key strategy together with developing industry-specific strategy for the green hydrogen. And this could also leverage renewable potential and transition toward a clean and more sustainable energy in the future. And I think this come up with another insights as well, because we mentioned about the power infrastructure should be prioritized in short or medium term, and also hydrogen infrastructure. This insight align with the prioritization of renewable energy, as the power infrastructure can also facilitate adoption of the renewable energy. And not only power infrastructure, but also hydrogen infrastructure development as well, by integrating energy and industrial consideration are also very important, as hydrogen can emerge in decarbonizing sector like power, transportation and also industry, so that incorporate hydrogen into existing energy mix or require coordination with the renewable energy source. And so that infrastructure for renewable energy and hydrogen production go hand in hand. And of course, well preparation of power infrastructure like grid modernization or upgrade transmission and distribution infrastructure to support integration of a higher share of variable renewable energy resource like solar and wind. Sometimes they can ensure the stable and reliable electricity supply, even with some fluctuation of the renewable energy generation. And in addition to this topic, some developing of interconnecting or cross-country transmission and renewable electricity trade between Southeast Asia countries can also facilitate some exchange of renewable electricity and also optimizing resource utilization and enhance energy security and promote investment in Southeast Asia regions as well. And also this also support the topics of the role of clean hydrogen for reaching climate neutrality and also clear long-term policy framework to attract investor and increase local value of creation as well. But last but not least, I also do agree with the utilization of green ammonia shipping industry and also the green fertilizer in the future. But I see some different points in coal power plant usage, as Dr. Sirichai mentioned as well, in terms of flexibility in operation. Of course, gas power plant, for example, hydrogen blending in natural gas power plant provide more flexibility compared with the coal-firing power plant with ammonia, which is necessary for balancing compatibility in high renewable power grid system. And of course, Thailand power generation is, for example, basically we is dominated by gas power plant. For example, 60% of total energy energy consumption come from the natural gas one, so that more focus should be replacing natural gas with clean hydrogen for power generation, of course. But however, there are some specific areas, for example, country like Japan, also South Korea, and eventually Singapore, that could benefit from coal-firing ammonia, or including 100% pure ammonia combustion in their decarbonization plan, as this country cannot produce hydrogen domestically at competitive price, comparing with import ammonia. And they importing ammonia, and their available infrastructure already exists, and cracking ammonia back into hydrogen will not the energy efficient way to implement in the short to medium terms. And ammonia so is a suitable candidate for decarbonization of existing coal-fired power plant in those countries that have no plan to phase out in short to medium term. So they might need an exist strategy for this case. This is a special case for several countries. And also green ammonia can also potential to fully replace by coal and retrofit some existing equipment, which is more cost effective for power plant owner than replacing with an entire power plant with the hydrogen firing. But however, I agree that NOx emission is the more important to be addressed in and concerned in this case as well. So I would say this is my perspective from the inside, but they actually give more informative information for further development, not only for Thailand, but also in other countries in Southeast Asia. Thank you.
Thanks a lot, Pramote. Thanks for your input. So I note again the prioritization on supporting renewable electricity, which is our first insight. Without low-cost electricity, green hydrogen will never be competitive. The question of broader sustainability criteria, which goes also into the certification of hydrogen, the question of infrastructure, which will be key, and also the trade-off between electricity and gas grid. And here again, this controversial question regarding green ammonia used in a power plant. So I think this is an interesting point of discussion. I would be happy to bring this question back to our experts in Berlin. Do you have more evidence to answer the concern that have been raised by two of our panelists regarding the economic of green ammonia in coal-fired plants? The fleet of coal power plants in the region is very young. So the question is what to do with these assets. They have maybe only 15 years or not even, sometimes even less of use. So the big question is in the question of going towards net zero. Does it make sense to co-fire ammonia in the coal power plants? On the gas components, that was also targeted by the panelists from Thailand. I think the question is a bit different, but ultimately it's the same. How much does it make sense to gradually move from fossil gas to actually clean gas?
Kathrin, do you want to start with the co-firing question part?
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, so just to come back quickly to the different statements from the panelists, of course, the question of coal plants is major in the region. So we're not trying to say that there shouldn't be a way to retrofit somehow these existing plants. However, we see that the transition to full co-firing of green ammonia will not happen before 2050. So we do have an urgency to decarbonize the power sector, and so we do see a risk of investing in this technology while not investing enough in the power sector. And just to give you a few more numbers from the report, from an emissions perspective, using 20% of co-firing, which would be definitely the case in the short until the medium term, would lead to 94% more emissions than natural gas plants in Malaysia, 77% in Thailand, 60% in the Philippines, and 44% in Indonesia. So these are results from our quantitative calculations. And again, to stress that there is a competitive advantage of developing renewables and especially PV in the region, which are much more cheaper than retrofitting these coal power plants. Additionally, these high costs will lead to the fact that not all coal plants can be retrofitted. So in the end, I think we have a number between 50 and 60% of coal plants which would even qualify for this retrofitting. And then there's also a question of carbon lock-in. So once you have this infrastructure for green ammonia, what do you do with them once you have a transition to it? So overall, we see that there is a risk of adopting this technology without looking at it. There's also a risk of nitrogen oxide being emitted. So yeah, there's been a push from technology providers in Japan, in South Korea, and we just think that this should be carefully looked at. But yeah, definitely, we are not saying that this question is not really important.
Maybe.
Thanks, Kathrin. Yeah, Fabian, please.
Dimitri, if I can complement a little bit, I think it's important to understand the context of Southeast Asia, and I think Dimitri raised a very important point regarding the young coal fleet in the region. And maybe there are other strategies to be analyzed in case of how to abate the emissions for the coal sector. And we don't see that co-firing green ammonia is a more efficient, also in terms of cost, in terms of emission reduction, as in terms of the favoring also the electricity supply in the region. We see that there are other options, including considering to a certain extent carbon capture and storage for young coal fleets could be an option, or try to see how to redirect these investments in a short term. At the same time, maybe another question that Dimitri was mentioning is the firing of clean gas or like hydrogen for power generation. We see that hydrogen as a base load is not the most cost-effective mechanism for use of hydrogen. It's quite inefficient because you have to transform electricity to hydrogen, then you have a reduction in terms of energy efficiency, and then you're going to transform again hydrogen into electricity. especially in a region like Southeast Asia with a lot of renewable potential, we don't see that should be prioritized in that way. We see hydrogen production as a way of increasing flexibility in the system. Is it properly integrated? We have even some examples in the report about this option of how hydrogen production can even facilitate the intake of renewables in the power system. But to produce electricity might not be the most cost-effective way, because it can also tend to increase the electricity costs, which at the end of the day that also can hinder the socioeconomic development in the region. So we see renewables as a most cost-effective strategy in terms of production of electricity. And we have different resources. No, we don't talk only about solar and wind. We have countries with geothermal energy, countries with hydropower, with biomass, bioenergy, very important also as base loads, renewable generation, clean generation. So that's why we see more these transitions toward these clean energy sources, base loads that keep maybe pushing fossil fuels or considering even hydrogen for power generation base load.
Thanks a lot, Fabian and Kathrin. I will just bring back this question to Dr. Pham, because I know that this is an important also part of specifically the Vietnam strategy on the road towards net zero. But before doing this, we'll also ask the whole audience to contribute to a Mentimeter again. You will see a question which will appear, so you can again log in the same number of the Mentimeter that was put before. And the question is the following: which hydrogen topic would you like to see discussed in depth in future analysis? We will gather your contribution on this and see if we can bring this back to the discussion. But first, Dr. Pham, what is the view you have, or maybe the view of the Vietnamese government regarding the question of using green ammonia in coal power plants?
It is very interesting questions and really tough questions to touch upon, because as you may know that during the in the PDP8, in the power development plans recently approved by the prime ministers, okay, the coal firing in the power plant, basically for the coal fiber plant, may be one of the ways to approach the net zero emission. But provided that when the price of electricity is realistic and the all resources are available. So that's the kind of assumption. As you may know that I totally agree with Dr. Sirichai and Dr. Pramote indicating that the coal firings of the ammonia seems to be, very sensitive issues in our regions. You may know that, okay, in Japan, in the South Korea, there are only a few research development perspective incentive on, ammonia co-firing. And on the other hand, you also have some hydrogen co-firing, okay, in the thermal power plant, basically for the gas-fired combined cycles. Those are things, okay, in the intermediate seems to be theoretically, suggestions. But of course, now, we're talking about the localized cost of electricity is produced from the coal-firing system. It depends heavily on the technology perspective development from now to the futures. In Vietnam, I am sure from now to 2030s, we still realize on the coal use and the development of the coal firing, talking about the biomass coal firing, ammonia coal firing, or hydrogen coal firing with natural gas should be happening after 2035. So from now to that point, there are a lot of development, in the technology, about the cost, about the other things. So those the variable, or should be taken into account before deciding that we have to follow that kind of thing. But it's necessary for right now to say that, okay, develop a capacity building for the new technology must be, put beforehand, okay? And on the other hand, talking about the hydrogen's role, I totally agree with, the Agora in the point saying that hydrogen production could be used as secondary before the first two actions should be implemented. Integrations of renewable energy technology in the power sectors to decarbonize the system, and also the energy efficiency should be put forwards. And hydrogen could be used as the non-energy, sectors, just using as that the feedstock that could be, so that the affordabilities of the local people could be achieved. And on the other hand, the hydrogen could be used only in the sector where it is hard to electrify. So those are things that my personal comment. But right now, the use, the application, the research and development and application of the coal-firing for the coal-fired power plant and gas-fired plants in Vietnam are still in the research development process. And we are looking at the new developments, the emerging information about that thing in the near future before, deciding to do what to do from now to until 35, sorry. Is it clear for you?
Thanks a lot, Dr. Pham. I think it's very clear. So uncertainty also on the technology development of co-firing, prioritization to renewables, and the use of hydrogen in sectors where there is no alternative and where the value will be best utilized. I would like to zoom out a little bit and Shani, ask you, there was a question from the audience. Which role do you see for the international cooperation in the region? So within the ASEAN framework, but also together with some of the most important trade partners, being it China or East Asia. Also, do you see the emergence of a unified hydrogen strategy for the region, or do you see different national strategy that may not totally align from a regional perspective? So the audience would be interested to get your view on this, Shani.
Yeah, thanks for the questions. I think from regional perspective, we are not trying to have another strategy in the regions, but what we want to do is considering the different strategies between the countries have, like Singapore wants to be a hub and Indonesia aspired to play a role as producer at some point, and perhaps there will be other national strategy that will be coming as well. What we want to do in the regions is to notify what are the priorities of these countries in Southeast Asia, what they are aspired to do, and what are the regional things that we could collaborate to push this kind of national agendas and help them to thrive in their own economy. So we are not trying to harmonize like all the strategy to be like one regional strategy that might be not aligned, but what we are trying to do is to pick up those different aspirations and those different views on the hydrogen development and see where those are intersect or coincides. For example, the development of infrastructure like bunkering of this hydrogen fuels and etc., which I think there are potential to be collaboratively done in the regions in terms of like routes for like shipping and routes for exporting to the demand centers. I think this is where the potential for and opportunities for ASEAN to look at. So in short, we are trying to pick up what the ASEAN nations wants to do and perhaps put that together as in the regions to support those different views. There are potential collaborations that we will do and put it as a sort of like a strategy on the regions, what we need to push together. So I think that's the view from the ASEAN Center for Energy.
Thanks a lot, Shani. And just to spin this a little bit, we have this other question asking, do you think there will be more decentralized, let's say, solution with a really production, as you just mentioned in your opening remark, also at the industry side? Or do you think there will be also large infrastructure in trade, being it through pipelines or LNG? Is it already something you have conceived at ACE, or is it too early to really understand how this broader picture will look like? So decentralization or rather a centralization and trade?
I think it really depends on how we look at and how we want to project the hydrogen economy that will be developed in the coming years. But I think there will be the two options that you just mentioned are very feasible. I mean, in terms of the national utilizations of hydrogen, then it would make sense to decentralize and co-locate the productions and consumptions. But if we are looking at the trade potential and treat the hydrogen as a commodity, then perhaps the later options of large development of infrastructure needed to be built. But I think for like in the near term, in the future, I think the first one where the hydrogen could be used co-located or decentralized is much more certain, I would say, to decarbonize the industry sectors, as we need to replace the fossil fuel hydrogen as a feedstock for this industry sector. But then the longer sort of like a big hydrogen infrastructure that needs to be in place, I think that's a lot of uncertainty, and how it pans out in the future. It really depends on the demand center as well, and it really depends on many factors, and also it's heavy investment. So I think perhaps from the nation perspective, they are trying both, they are seeing both possibility. But from my perspective, the nearest one for the hydrogen development, I would say that the country should opt is the decentralized one, compared to the other option.
Thanks a lot, Shani, for this view. I think indeed there is quite a lot of uncertainty, and looking at the strategy of exports that some countries have, which like Vietnam, for example, which are very ambitious, maybe also facing, let's say, some reality check when it comes to the ability of other countries to just source the demand or reduce overall the gas demand or hydrogen demand. I would like to go back to Thailand, and there is actually Sirichai, there is the question you raised on co-firing, but I would like to take it from a different perspective, and rather from the question of sourcing hydrogen, because in our report we are focusing very much on green hydrogen, where we see a lot of potential of cost reduction and also a fully decarbonized hydrogen. But from the perspective of a country like Thailand, which is still a gas producer and has a very high dependency on gas, fossil gas, I would like to get your view on how you see the role basically fossil gas plus CCS, what we call sometimes blue hydrogen, would play potentially in the strategy of Thailand, and where do you see the let's say the interaction with green hydrogen?
So as you already mentioned, that Thailand still really depends on the natural gas resources that we have. So natural gas is still the main fuel for electricity generation of our country. So for the hydrogen development plan, we plan to utilize the resource that we already have, which is natural gas. So producing the blue hydrogen is one of the potential industry that might come up. So there are some locations that can have potential to be the carbon storage, and we can just convert our natural gas to be blue hydrogen through the steam reforming processes, and just keep the carbon back underground. So in terms of the cost, we found that the blue hydrogen is like 2 or 3 times cheaper than the green hydrogen at the moment. So in the plan that we develop for the government, we foresee that the blue hydrogen will come in the short and medium term first. But for the green hydrogen, we have to wait until the cost of renewable energy goes down to the level that it can compete with the fossil fuel gas. Then the green hydrogen will become will play a role during that time. So to answer your question, both colors of hydrogen are very important for Thailand to reach our decarbonization goal. But the blue will come first because of the lower price, and the green will come after, because we need to wait for the development of IE in our country.
Thanks a lot, Sirichai. I understand your perspective, and I would like to zoom out a little bit and go back to our colleagues from Agora, who has looked at this question of blue versus green hydrogen in different contexts, not only looking at Thailand, but more globally. Could you give us maybe Fabian or Kathrin's perspective that you see on the development of this, let's say, blue hydrogen as a potential transition fuel towards the green, how long this transition may be, what are the risks associated with this strategy, and the question of cost, because Sirichai, you just mentioned that the cost would be more competitive for blue hydrogen. But what about period with very high fossil fuel gas prices, as we have seen during the energy crisis? So I don't know if one of you, maybe Fabian, you want to pick up on this one and give a broader perspective.
Sure, Dimitri, thank you. I mean, we have analyzed this option of fossil-based hydrogen with CCS or blue hydrogen compared to green in different regions, in very different contexts. And in the case of Southeast Asia, for most of the countries are highly dependent on the global gas prices. So we see, for example, how the peak of the prices has affected the competitiveness also in different periods of time. And that, for example, makes also green hydrogen or renewable hydrogen much more cost effective in certain periods of time when we have these high peaks in gas prices. I mean, this is not the case for countries that produce gas, as is the case in Southeast Asia for Malaysia, but we have seen also the same case for countries like Argentina, like Brazil. They are gas producers, so in that case, they don't experience these high peaks on costs. So fossil-based hydrogen with CCS is a bit more stable, and then you see a bit more competitiveness compared to renewable hydrogen. And for those countries, when we say that they could consider using this technology as a bridge technology, but yeah, there are certain risks associated to this. The first thing is in terms of sustainability. So carbon capture and storage has to have high capture rates. The technology is still not there yet to achieve those high capture rates. Some countries are looking into enhanced oil recovery, for example, as an option of carbon capture and storage, but this is not the most effective way of capturing and storing CO2 emissions, because at the same time you're producing more oil and gas, so you are offsetting those emissions that you're capturing and storing. You have also infrastructure development that you require for carbon, like for the capture, the transport, the storage, and this is quite costly. So you're gonna require also more investments in that sense. So you start comparing investments. I think Shani was mentioning about this as well. It can be quite expensive, quite investment intensive on the hydrogen development. So if you don't do it in a planned way that is also for favor other sectors, maybe this carbon infrastructure is not so competitive compared to renewable hydrogen. We see the risk of fugitive emissions, not only when extracting the gas, but also when transforming gas into hydrogen. There is a risk of fugitive emissions that can increase also even the impact of fossil-based hydrogen with CCS mixed with methane leakage can increase even the impact compared to fossil hydrogen. And we also, the risk of carbon lock-in and stranded assets. I think, Dimitri, as you mentioned, these investments are not only for a few years, but it's long-term perspective. So we will see that these investments can in the future not be so attractive anymore, because we are seeing an appetite for green markets in the world. So then you have to evaluate until what extent it makes sense to invest more in this kind of infrastructure and not in infrastructure that are going to make more competitive, create more competitivity for the countries, especially when talking about the industrial sector and the trade of these products. So the global perspective that we see is that, yeah, it can be a technology as a bridge technology for certain countries that with fossil fuel resources, but they have to have all these considerations. In the case of Southeast Asia in general, we see that this technology might not be so competitive compared to renewable hydrogen, even in the short term. But of course, it goes in hand with correct policies and regulatory framework for renewables. So prioritizing renewables will make that renewable hydrogen will be cost effective and faster than this other technology. So that's how I see it.
Yes, thanks a lot, Fabian, for this perspective. We are also almost reaching the end of our webinar, but I would like to ask one last question to actually Pramote, and then look quickly at the Mentimeter that has been actually brought by the audience and have a wrap up. But Pramote, there is one question regarding how to make hydrogen, green hydrogen, cost competitive. What kind of actually regulatory framework we need, and what about any type of CO2 pricing mechanism that could help make it competitive? Since you are working on this topic of the H2 hub and ensure scale up of the industry, what is your perspective on this type of mechanism that we need to implement in Thailand, in the region?
Thank you so much. And then I have to quick answer this question because right now we know that the green hydrogen is not competitive to the fossil fuel. We have to fill in some gap of the difference in the cost of production. The most convenient and easy way to replace to fill in that gap is just the carbon pricing or carbon tax for the polluter have to pay for the carbon emission in some certain price that can cover all of the green hydrogen production to meet or cost parity with the gray hydrogen in some time. But we actually do some kind of assumption to compare this gray hydrogen and this green hydrogen with the carbon tax mechanism into the comparison process. But it depends on several aspects. For example, natural gas price or how much carbon tax should be addressed in the region or context. It might be different because Singapore already planned for the carbon tax for some specific number, but actually European country has more ambitious. They could pay more and find investors can pay some higher price than that local country. So that I would say is depends on the local region that can make some summary and conclusion together that how much carbon tax could be efficient in our region to facilitate the green hydrogen production competitive with other region as well.
Thanks a lot, Pramote. So we have already reached the end of this webinar, but I would like quickly to have a last round and give 10-15 seconds to each of you, but also reflect on the Menti question that we just received from the participants. So Grace, if there is anything you can also show on this. The question is quite simple. Which topic you think we need to have in-depth discussion and future analysis in order to move this hydrogen discussion at your country level or at the regional level? And I will start with Shani.
So I think for me, it's integrated energy planning, long-term planning is a powerful tool when to consider to map this identifications of where hydrogen could play a role. So I think this is something that perhaps need to be deep dive, and then how this what does it mean, how to translate this kind of modeling and projections into a policy sort of like tools. I think this is the important thing and helpful for the regions.
Thanks a lot, Shani. Dr. Pham, what is, in your view, the priority in terms of analysis or research or open question we need to clarify?
Thank you, Dimitri. For me, I mean that the next topics to be deep dive that should be standard and certifications of the hydrogens and PTH products for export. Thank you.
Yeah, very good points. Thanks a lot, Dr. Pham. Pramote, what is your prioritization?
I would say the trade dynamic study in terms of Southeast Asia region. We have several kind of hydrogen and derivatives facility already exist in Southeast Asia. We should more focus on the market and potential of these kind of products.
Okay, very good. Thank you, Pramote. And last word for you, Sirichai, priority for new analysis or research to move the debate in the right direction. Oh, we cannot hear you, Sirichai.
Actually, my answer is the same as Professor Pham, that we do need the standard and certificate for hydrogen to avoid like double counting, to avoid not low carbon hydrogen to enter the market, and also the knowledge transfer that because hydrogen is a new thing for almost all of us, and we need to do capacity building. We have to transfer knowledge among the expert and people in the region have to know and understand hydrogen better. Yeah.
Thanks a lot, Sirichai. And thanks to all. So I'm sorry I had to rush a bit at the end, but the discussion was extremely interesting. We are running slightly beyond schedule. I want to thank all the panelists again, and also the presenters from Agora for the very interesting insights and presentation.